Shall we come to order? Yes. Oh, I also have presents for everybody,
Oh, that's,
which is, I'm sure you're going to be thrilled about. Don already has his.
It doesn't fit in that thing though.
Oh, you're not using it, you're not
I
using
put
your, here we
I
go.
put it here. I don't know
Thank
if I'll be
you.
able to.
Everybody gets dividers. Okay, all right, very good. This is my stack here.
I'm not sure that was on my gift registry, but okay.
You didn't know you needed it.
Get a gift registry at
All right,
Staples.
ladies and gentlemen.
My Tiffany. Yeah.
Yes, right, your Tiffany, and we have little goodies if you need some extra energy. Extra energy, right, thank you.
All right, so
Yes, oh, and here, Patrick.
we got June staying late, so let's kind of
Yes.
get right into her thing. Oh, okay, thanks.
We are, let's just get over a few. We are called to order. We'd like to approve, I'd like to thank, Liz is not feeling well. I think everybody knows she got a very bad case of COVID and, but she's with us. So we're happy to see you. Yes, there, Liz. She did an unbelievable job with the minutes. So I wish to thank you. I'm not sure who's going to take the minutes for this meeting. Is anyone volunteering? Are we going to just,
If I do it, it will be really,
Can watch the tape.
I can watch, I'll watch the tape later and just do it then.
all right. Oh, thank you, Liz. When you can, because you did an outstanding job. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes, please? I move it. Second,
second.
all those in favor?
We have to do a roll call because we have a member on Zoom. Hi, Patrick.
Excuse me. All right, forgive me. What procedure do we need?
So if a member of the committee is on Zoom, it has to be a roll call vote.
Okay,
So just
so-
say your name, I Patrick, or nay Patrick, or whatever. I say I Patrick. And
Aye, Patrick.
no, you say I Randy, because you're not Patrick.
Right, but why are we saying aye?
Or you say yes. I and yes.
Aye, yes, I see. All right.
Aye,
Yes,
aye.
Randy Warner.
Because I like pirates.
Don Eaton.
Aye, Jan Acker.
I live.
We have a quorum.
Yep.
And thank you all for coming. Patrick, quickly fill us in on perhaps obtaining some new members of our group.
So I have Dr. Michaela, who's thrown her name into the hat if it gets on tomorrow's select board agenda. And I've informally reached out to some of the folks who had considered joining before, but to see if they're interested in putting their name back in the ring. So when I hear back, I will let you know.
Right, so will Michaela be voted on tomorrow?
I assume it's on the agenda.
It's on the agenda. Excellent. Thank you for coming today. We have a very special presentation. June Wolf, who runs the construction and development for Construct, which is an affordable housing development company and the owner of our Pine Woods affordable housing project. She is here today and she's going to talk first and foremost, she's going to give us an education about the alphabet soup and structure of affordable housing in our state. And we thank you.
And congratulations on the deal we saw in the paper today.
What was that?
Windflower.
Was it again today?
It was maybe,
It was an editorial about it today.
yeah, that's right, the editorial.
Oh, really? Oh, my goodness. Fantastic. I saw the article. That when, does everybody know what we're talking about? Yeah, the motel conversion. I think it's very, very innovative. And if it works, everybody'd like to copy your idea because it sounds absolutely terrific. But anyway, June, welcome. We appreciate it. Liz has agreed to handle the Pine Woods project as part of her duties on this group, but we're going to spare her from having to say anything tonight. So welcome, June, and we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Great. Hi, everyone. So I've had this conversation with a few of you and then not with some of you. And of course, Andrea already knows all this. So I'm going to go through it on the quick side because I have to get off by 7:30. Just put, if you're on the Zoom, you can do the hand raise thing, or if you're in the room, y'all can interrupt me if you have questions. And I'm going to share my screen and That's not, sorry, that's not the one. Second. There we go. Okay. Okay, so I'm just starting off with some of the headlines, around the affordable housing shortage. It's gotten a lot worse. So some of these headlines are like from last year, and it's only gone down from there. And there's important things to notice. One, that this problem is not just local; it's everywhere. But that doesn't really absolve us from trying to fix it. And another is that, we have to think about who we're talking about, because when we talk about affordable housing, we're talking about people who have incomes below 60% of AMI, and I'll get to that in more detail. But there's a real shortage for people who don't qualify for affordable housing units. And we call those people workforce housing if they're above the 60%, but below 120%. But there's even a shortage of people above that now. There's just a shortage of units, period. And then there's a shortage of affordable units, more so. We're Construct, and this is what we do. So while I'm talking, I'm just playing a screen that tells you who the people are who live in our affordable housing. And these are jobs of people we have housed or are housing right now. There's a huge misconception about what affordable housing is. A lot of people think that people in affordable housing don't work and they get everything for free, but that's not the case. And I kind of have a problem with the concept of workforce housing, because it's a misnomer. Everybody is working, sometimes 2 and 3 jobs, and they're just not making enough to afford housing locally. So who benefits from affordable housing? Sometimes when we talk about building affordable housing, people think, like, as I said, that we're just giving away units. And it's true that when we house our workers affordably, people are healthier, which is interesting. And not just because of COVID, although COVID certainly illustrated that. People have economic mobility. So we make this mistake of thinking that our society breaks down into renters and owners, but that's not really true. I mean, I would ask anyone here, when you got out of school, did you buy a house immediately afterwards? I don't see any hands up, but because that's kind of unusual. We have this continuum of housing. When you get out from, your family home, get done with school, you tend to bounce, like in your 20s. There's couch surfing and your roommates, and you do whatever you have to do when you're that age. But then, as you start to get into a relationship and you start to build your own family, that's when you look for more permanent housing, and usually that starts with rentals. Then when you really decide on who you're going to stay with and who you're going to live with, that's when you buy your first home. And a lot of times it's kind of cute to watch now that I'm old, these young people who are like, this is my forever home. And I'm like, yeah, probably not. You're probably going to move on to something else, or certainly when your kids are grown, you're very likely to downsize. And even then, and this is certainly something that comes up in Stockbridge a lot, and Lenox, my parents are in Lenox. Even after you've downsized, at some point, you're going to downsize further. You're going to, look at elderly housing or independent living or something like that. So, we do tend to follow the same trajectory. And then sometimes people get bounced back. So you're going along that trajectory, and then a disaster happens, a crippling car accident, a divorce, domestic violence, something like that. And we get a lot of people on that bounce. Even then, it's not permanent. They can do better and move on, especially at Pinewoods. And I'll tell you why. Pinewoods has a lot of problems, but this is something they do really well. Also, the town benefits. And we're going to talk some about that in a few minutes about, we talked about having affordable housing means that you get young people in your town, and young people are good for a town. Young people are producers. They add to the economy. They work at sometimes 2 and 3 jobs, as I say, but they try to work locally. They are parents, so they often have children, and the children go to school, and the children are consumers as well. They're consumers. They shop locally and they contribute money to the economy. This group of people is more likely to put their money back into the economy than any other group of people. So it's good for all the businesses in towns as well. And I have the local business section highlighted in red because as you mentioned, we're doing the Windflower project, and that is extended stay in a hotel. It's very different. We've never done it before. I looked nationwide to see if anybody has ever done it before, and I'm not finding a lot of people who have, because you're asking people to live together communally, to share common spaces, and just have their own suite, their own bedroom and bathroom. But the reason we did that is because employers are begging us to do something. And you notice that Josh gets mentioned a lot in these articles and even in the editorial today. Josh has a restaurant in New Marlboro called Cantina. I don't know if you know that. And last winter, he closed. He closed for the winter. And New Marlboro was so upset because they love it. You can't get into the place, really. And they were so disappointed. But New Marlboro has, no affordable housing, zero affordable housing. They don't even have rentals in New Marlboro. They used to, but they've mostly turned over into vacation rentals, or they were bought up and turned into private housing. So they realized that, they had to do something, and they're not the only one. So any town that has businesses, and you'd think I'm talking about every town, but of course I'm not. There are towns that have no businesses left, like Monterey. But any town that has businesses really wants to have workers, and the workers need to live nearby. I had a dental hygienist in Great Barrington who was telling me about her efforts to buy a home. She ended up in Cheshire. And I said to her boss when she wasn't around, I was like, how much longer is she going to work for you if she's commuting to Great Barrington from Cheshire? And he said, well, I hope a long time, a couple months. There's a lot of jobs for dental hygienists in Pittsfield. Why would you drive all the way to Great Barrington? So it really hurts the economy not to have these workers. Okay. So we talked a little bit about what affordable housing is. And I just want to go over this because in case anybody is confused about it. So this is not something we made up. And a lot of people say, oh, the reason people hate affordable housing is because it's called affordable housing. It's like, well, it's been called a lot of other things and people hated it then too. So, but affordable housing is what the state calls it. It's based on the area median income for your area. So every year we get a new area median income published. The benchmark is a family of 4. And 100% of the area median income this year is $92,100 for Berkshire County. So we get it published for both Berkshire and Pittsfield, and obviously we use the Berkshire County number. Then there's a chart, which I'm going to show you, which breaks it down for different size families and different income levels. So 30%, 50%, and 60% of that AMI. So it's a little complicated. So the best way to do it, if next year you need the chart and you want to know, wait till April and then go to one of these sites that I have listed here and you can look it up. I have to tell you, the first one is a lot easier to use than the second one. The second one is the HUD portal, and I'm going to show you both of those. Okay, so here's the LIHTC one. And this one, when you go there, you have to tell it, what your area is, what state you're in, what kind of project you're talking about. You have to give it the details, and then they'll give you the breakdown. And the standard one they give you is the 60%, but then you can add whatever you want. So I added the 30 and 50 because those are typical units in affordable housing. And then I added 65% because that's what ARPA funds. ARPA will fund up to 65% of AMI.
June,
Yes,
question. So this acronym LIHTC, oh, is that on this list you gave us?
yes, it
Because
is.
I probably should have checked before I asked you. Okay.
Yeah.
These are federal guidelines. Gotcha. All right.
So this one is for low-income housing tax credit, which is what Pinewoods was.
Oh,
But
okay.
but their site is just a lot easier to use when you're looking up the income limits. So I use it for everything all the time. I put in the 80 and 100% because that's those are the limits for workforce housing. So for example, if we were to do a home ownership project, we would estimate the affordability based on 70 and 80% of affordable housing. If you were to do workforce units, you might go as high as 100%. And I know I already told you what the 4-person was, although this is reflecting a little higher on that. But then there's also all those other family sizes you have to look. So this one's the HUD one. I gave you the link for that as well, but you can see it's a little weird because it has the family sizes, but instead of calling it 30, 50, 60, it starts with 50 and then it asks, and then it tells you extremely low income. And you're like, well, which one is that? Right? You'd think that would be 60 because it's between 50 and 80, but it's not, it's 30. And if you want to figure out 60 based on this, you need to go back to your 7th grade math and cross multiply. So if you're all into that, fine. Otherwise, use the LIHTC stuff. Okay. So the rent limits are a little bit different. They're not based on the income limits. So the income is calculated based on the people who are residents, not second homeowners, but people who are residents, their incomes. The rent limits are based on fair market rent. And that's based on the poverty limit. And that's why it takes so long for these numbers to come out. The poverty limit is published pretty soon. And then the fair market rent is calculated. And then the rent limits are figured out sometime in April, unless pretty much anything comes up. COVID, an election, you know, lots of reasons. But if you don't see it in April, just wait, it'll come. Okay, and we talked about, and the utilities. So all those rents that you saw listed on the previous slide, that includes utilities. So that we look at what someone can pay for their housing. So their rent and their utilities. And that's the limit that we operate at. Now, generally, we ask people to pay their own utilities. So I go to Andrea and I ask her for the utility allowance that she calculates for the community. And then we base our rents off that rent limit minus the utility allowances that we got from Stockbridge Housing. And then that's our maximum rent. Okay.
June,
Yes.
that's, in other words, when you build a rental complex, you calculate these rents based on these guidelines in the utility.
Right.
And then that's what the occupant pays?
That's right. Yeah.
And then how do you, but obviously that level is not enough to support your project.
Well, it has to be. So that's a great question. So let me go back one slide. See if we can get, so you'll have noticed that these 30% rents are really pretty low, right? $564 for a 1-bedroom. If we did a whole building full of 30% units, we could not afford to run it. But I can't get any money from the state if I show them a negative cash flow. If I say I have to do something called a pro forma, which goes out 20 years, and I say for 20 years, we're going to collect this much money in rent, we're going to spend this much money on maintenance, we're going to put this much money in our reserve fund, we're going to pay this much money on our debt, and then we're going to have a very little cash flow just to carry us over from year to year. So if I tell them I'm going to have a negative cash flow, they're like, then we're not giving you any money, because you can't, that's not sustainable. We don't want to put investment into unsustainable projects. So when I do something that has 30% units in it, I will ask the state for project-based vouchers. Those are vouchers that are, and I think you all met with Andrea, so I'm sure she went over the difference between mobile vouchers and project-based vouchers. But just as a reminder, the project-based vouchers are attached to the unit, and we can charge 110% of the fair market rent. Now look over at the one bedroom. I said that the 30% was $564. The fair market rent is $1,016. And I can charge 110% of that. So we're talking about $1,100 for a 30% unit because the tenant's not paying it. The tenant will never pay that because the tenant only pays a third of their income toward that rent. And then the housing authority pays the rest with their vouchers.
This is section 8, basically.
This is section 8. I try not to use that term because people that, when I remember I said nobody likes the term affordable housing, nobody liked it when we called it section 8 either. And at one time, part of the problem was at one time, cities made whole communities of section 8 housing. And they basically created ghettos, which didn't work for anyone. So now those section 8 vouchers are sprinkled throughout the community. You only get a few of them for each development that you build. And then some people come in and out with the mobile vouchers so that you have more economic integration by, mixing your incomes.
Great explanation.
Do you have, June? Oh, sorry, this is a soup. Do you then,
I'm
when you
only on
do,
the 5th slide.
I know, you said it was like this. But does that mean that when you develop a project like you did in Great Barrington recently, do you decide a mix of these 30 and 50 and 60 and 70 and 80% units?
Yes. So you know what? I will jump down to my last slide with the how does this work, right? So the very beginning is when we develop identify a property. And so sometimes the town comes to us and says, we have this property that we want you to develop, or sometimes it's a private homeowner, sometimes it's donated to us, sometimes it's just a real estate sale. The Castles property, we bought it at auction, right? There's a lot of different ways to do that. But we have that stage where we identify the property, but then we have to evaluate it. And there's a lot of things we look at there. But then stage 2 is the planning stage. So remember I told you I do a 21-year pro forma. So first thing I do is I figure out the unit mix. I look at the property. So for example, in Castles, it's an existing building. It has an 18-bedroom septic. So I said, okay, I need to have 18 bedrooms. However I cut this up, I need to have 18 bedrooms. So I did the unit mix. It kind of naturally laid itself out according to the architecture of the building. And then I have to say which ones are going to be 30s, 50s, 60s. And of course, right? So sometimes I'll have a 1-bedroom 30 and a 2-bedroom 30, or a, 2-bedroom 60s and a 2-bedroom 50 kind of thing. But I make the unit mix before we do anything else, because when I go for funding, I have to know how many units, what's their income breakdown, and then to build the pro forma, I have to know their rents. So I will make a budget based on, this year's rent limits, and then, consider vacancy and all that kind of thing. And then next year I'll adjust it because probably the rent limits will have gone up. But just to build the budget, I will say, this is how much we're going to be taking in. And that determines whether or not the project is feasible. Because if I say, this is how much we're taking in, and this is how much I know a project costs to run, then we can only afford so much debt. Now, depending on what we get for an interest rate, because even though we get some subsidized mortgages, we're still, we're still in the market and the market moves, that can make or break the project, depending on our debt service coverage ratio, because, they can look at that and say, you're not going to make it. If your debt service is 1.01, you're not going to be able to, you're too close to the line. You're not going to be able to make this work. But we have a lot of ways that we show the funding. So does that answer
What
your
is
question?
not exactly, but because it's, I presume it's quite a game of moving 30 and 50 and 60 and 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. And it sounds like a Rubik's Cube of options that you have to put together in order to have everything line up.
So you'll notice that I use this pyramid as my diagram. And if you look at me starting from the top, you say, well, you're floating in the air. You don't have a base. And that's exactly right. When we start this, it's all in my head. This is just an idea that could or couldn't happen. And we build down to the actual construction. So when we start, it's pretty much a theory. And we say, okay, based on our expertise, based on our past experience, based on, the way the interest rate is right now and the funding sources right now, we think it can work if we have these many units at this, at these prices.
So June, how do you decide in your projection and your planning what level of maintenance, both annual maintenance and maybe, capital maintenance that you would need to do on the property?
So we have a lot of experience. We have a lot of properties we've done ourselves, properties we've done for other people. And so we use multipliers that we've relied on for years. And then I adjust them based on the type of property we're doing. So for example, Castleless is a renovation. So I upped it because renovations, they'll come back and surprise you later. I mean, we're pretty much gutting it, but there'll be something will come back. And then other things like when we did Hillside with the CDC, there was ledge, so we had to really think hard about like doing the drainage system and, and things like that. And so you have to adapt for stuff like that. So that is between Construct's expertise with managing properties and then our estimators' expertise at estimating costs. Of course, having said that, COVID was nuts. It really made things crazy. We started a project in 2019, but we weren't slated to start the construction until February of 2020. We got 3 weeks in and COVID hit. Some of the things we had already purchased, right? So our budget was spot on. Other things we hadn't, and the prices went nuts. They leveled off, they went back up, they leveled off again, they came back down a little bit, but it's, the supply chain shortages, that was fun.
So one other question, June. So if you have a year when you're operating and you have at the end of the year a surplus or a positive bottom line for that particular property, what happens to that positive bottom line?
That is a dream come true. So at Forest Springs, we built that to be very efficient and maintenance free. And so far, we're still maintenance free. Like we've hardly had any repairs on that property. So we have a really healthy cash flow. But like you said, we don't want to have too much of a cash flow. I think I didn't mention this, but the funding sources that we go to, those are permanent loans. So there is 0%, 30-year second mortgage, basically, that we don't have to pay back unless we make too much money. And then we do have to because if we make too much money, then we didn't need the money in the first place, right? So we should pay it back. But we do have, we are allowed to spend money on things we need. So at Forest Springs, we bought ourselves a snow blower. I mean, you know, we were willing to use shovels, but if we had the money, we're going to get a snow blower. The other thing we did, we put solar panels on that property, and the SRECs were bringing in extra dollars. So we gave all the tenants a rebate on their electric bill.
But do you keep all of that funding project by project, or does it all go into a kind of general fund for construct?
Excellent question. So some of our initial properties were in the general funds. East Street is a construct property. Some of the like privately donated homes, that is in the construct umbrella. But all of the developments since East Street, so Pine Woods, Forest Springs, Castles, those all had to be LLCs. So they have to be their own entity. So they are an entity that's owned by construct. So each one has its own audit. Each one has its own calendar, you know, has its own board, has its own calendar year, etc.
And do you share the audit results or the P&Ls for a given LLC with people like us?
I can't, because that's not my job, but I can ask Jane.
What's your budget roughly? Just a ballpark
For what?
for all of construct?
Oh, I wouldn't want to say because I don't know exactly.
Yeah. I'm just kind of curious ballpark.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the housing developer, so my budgets are like project by project, but I do see the budgets, but I don't memorize those. So a couple million.
What else do you want to tell us?
It's not that I don't want to tell you, I really don't know.
No, I said, what else we got for slides?
Okay, so let me go back to where I was. So we talked about some of the other details. All right, so where are you with affordable housing? Stockbridge, you know, so the state of Massachusetts has a mandate that every town should have 10% affordable housing. And congratulations to Stockbridge, because they're the only ones in Berkshire County that has exceeded that. You have 10.8% affordable housing. Now, having said that, there's an asterisk on that, because only full-time resident homes are counted. So you probably have more housing units than 1,051. Also, this data is from 2020. So it's really COVID-free. It does not reflect what happened to the real estate market in the last couple of years. So we won't know for a while. I'm hoping they'll do a special update of this, but they haven't done it yet. So if you look at some of the other towns in the community, you can see that some of them are getting closer to the 10%. Great Barrington, Lee, and Lenox are all getting up there. Not only are they in the higher percentages, but they have units in construction, so they're going to get even higher. Now, if you look and see what all these communities have in common, Great Barrington, Lee, Lenox, and Stockbridge, anybody know? I'll tell you, you all have CPA funds. And now most of you have affordable housing trusts. Stockbridge does, Great Barrington does, Lenox does, Lee does not. Egremont does now. They haven't done anything with it yet. So that's a difference. I think the CPA doesn't actually give you a lot of money to do a project, but somehow towns that have CPA do projects.
So are the first three lines, can you go back one? The first three lines are on units needed to 10% or just a typo, right? There should be 10% of that.
Right.
No, I'm sorry.
But
So
what are you asking, Patrick?
total housing units is, the total homeowners that live here full time. The SHI means subsidized housing inventory, and that's the number
No,
of,
two over from there.
I know, but that's the number of affordable units. So
Mhm.
then the units needed is how many you have left to get to 10%. So I don't know why, it looks like to me like they made a mistake on Alford because they have more
Yeah.
units than they have housing units, but,
Yeah, it should be 23. Okay, great. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
okay.
Mhm.
This is not my slide. This is,
That's all right.
this is from MAHA, the Massachusetts Affordable Housing Alliance. Okay, so how can a town increase its housing inventory? I have two slides on this. One is going to be, what you can do, and the other one is funding. So the first thing is that if you have an idea of where you want it, right? Where, properties that might be coming up for sale, or just properties where you think that would be a great location for affordable housing, keep an eye on it. My experience, having been doing this for a very long time, is that they come around. You think, oh, this would be a perfect spot, but gosh, it got sold during COVID, it will come back on the market. They always do. Abandoned properties are a good idea. I don't know how many of you know about receivership. I'll just do this very quickly. The Attorney General's office has an abandoned housing initiative, and they work with towns, either the building inspector or the health inspector, to identify properties that are below code, that are not up to building or health code. And then the town, when they've identified one that they want to come up to code, they ask for a receiver. Now, the program originated with for-profit receivers, and the for-profit receiver would go in, do whatever work was required and no more, and then they would put it up for auction. They would get what they put into it back out of it at auction, and anything over what they put into it would either go to secondary liens like the bank lien or the mechanic's lien, or it would go to the homeowner. Now, this is a court mandated and an operated project, so there's frequent visits with a judge. The homeowner comes to every one of them, unless the homeowner is deceased, and then every possible heir is invited to these hearings. At any time, the owners can buy out the receiver, and then the receiver just walks away. They get paid for what they did and they walk away. Construct became a receiver some years ago, and Beckett had a project where they had already done one for-profit, and then the receiver said, I'm not going to make any money on this. I'm not going to do it. They couldn't find a for-profit receiver, so they asked us to do it. They were wrong, by the way. That was right before COVID. And of course, during COVID, the value of the property increased significantly. But we took it on, and we did something innovative that no one had done, in that we applied for grant money so that we could put everything the property needed into it, to the tune of about $340,000, and still sell it for $250,000. So the grant made us whole. We used a little bit of CPA money from Beckett. We used the Rural Small Town Housing Initiative. We did apply for Federal Home Loan Bank. We didn't get it, but we didn't really need it. And we have a second one going. We just got the Rural Small Town Housing Initiative grant again, and we are about to receive a receiver loan. The receiver loan is a $100,000 interest-free loan that is 30% or more forgivable if you use it for affordable housing. So when we do this, we put a deed restriction on the property so that it is affordable in perpetuity. So that's, go ahead.
Do you come across multi-unit private ownership that is well below code? And possibly with things like tenant at will situations, so do you see a lot of that in North County?
Right, but we don't see a lot of that in South County
But do you
because,
come across any of it?
no, because we had, South County had very few multifamily units. We're gonna talk about that when we get to zoning. South County has very few multifamily units at all. Almost all of them are, affordable housing like Andrea's, mine, CDC's. And the few multifamily units that we had, many of them were either purchased and converted into single family homes or
But
purchased and used for vacation
but my
rentals.
question is this, if in a situation where you have a multifamily privately owned that is well below code, using things like tenant at will to keep the tenants at bay, is that a candidate for receivership?
Oh, yeah. In fact, Holyoke specializes in that model. Their CDC, Andrew, do you know Mike? Oh, of course, I'm blanking on his name now. Anyway, they that was their niche that they because it's Holyoke, there's a lot of 2 units. So they would get one in receivership. They would sell it to an owner who then rented the other side. They put deed restrictions on both sides. And so now they got 2 units, one homeownership unit and one rental unit out of it.
And then was there permanent restriction on the home ownership?
So that's a great question. So when I told you that when we did the receivership, we put a permanent restriction on it. Not everyone does a permanent one. So Lennox, their affordable housing trust, bought 2 houses. They fixed them up and they hired us to be their lottery agents because we're certified lottery agents, and we sold them affordably, but their affordable housing restriction was only 30 years. That's the minimum that, you know how I showed you the subsidized housing inventory and we counted all the units for each town? If you want to add a deed restricted homeownership to your subsidized housing inventory, minimum restriction is 30 years. So they went with the minimum. They did it for 30 years. So if, one of the families who buys it, keeps it for the life of the mortgage, they get to sell it for a lot more than affordable. They get to flip it. Although I gotta say, these 2 units, their lots are teeny tiny. So I don't know, 30 years from now, I'm not really sure they're gonna be worth a whole lot more than what they bought them for. But the idea is you can adjust the length of your deed restriction depending on the program.
That's interesting.
Are the Lennox houses both single family or are they multiple?
Yes, they're both single family.
Is below code enough to trigger a receivership, like well below code, like?
Yeah, below code, that's all. Your building inspector and your health inspector are really well versed in this. And so this it's actually a great tool, not just to create affordable housing. So Beckett had one where the owner didn't live there and he kept going back and forth. I'm going to fix it. No, I'm not. Yes, I am. And the attorney general was getting annoyed because she had to keep coming out to this property. And she was like, every time he tells me he's going to do it, he puts one nail in it and then he walks away. So I said, well, name me as a receiver and we'll go to court and he will fish or cut bait. And that's what he did. Once it got real and there was a receiver in the courtroom with him, he said, I am gonna fix it. And the judge said, well, you have 90 days. And in 90 days, he had done the work. So it can be motivating. That's the word we're looking for. Motivating.
What is a receiver? I'm not really sure I understand that.
People
So
can't
the
be small.
receiver is an agent of the court. That it is a contractor that is appointed by a judge to bring the building to code. So there's a very little interpretation around that definition. Like I said, the for-profit receivers tend to do the surface stuff, make it pretty, and then flip it and get out of there. For us, I don't want to put someone who's, paying their first mortgage in a house that's going to break. So we get a little deeper into it. We make sure that everything, in the walls is functional. I probably wouldn't accept a receivership on something I couldn't do that on, but I don't exactly put granite counters in it. I'll put all new counters, but nothing fancy. And then, so we go to court with the Attorney General. So the Attorney General is representing the town. They often they can send their health inspector or their building inspector, but they usually don't come because they don't have to. And then as a receiver, I have my own attorney, and the judge supervises it. So, for example, we identified a property in Beckett for the second one. They give us a chance to look at it. We have like 90 days or however long we ask for to go look at it. And then we come up with a rehabilitation plan. And that is much like the other plans that I described, where I make a budget and I do an affordability calculation. How much can we sell this for? And a family at 80% of AMI can afford it. And then I do the difference. Okay, this is what it's going to cost to build us. This is what they can buy it for. How am I going to cover the difference? And then I present that to the judge, and they approve it or deny it.
Well,
And if they approve it, then they appoint us.
who generates, do you go out and find properties that you think are deficient?
No.
No, the town does.
The town asks their Board of Health and or their building inspector. So in Beckett, they work together, or they did. The building inspector retired. So now it's mostly the Board of Health. Charlie Kinnicky, I don't know if you know him, he's Board of Health inspector in more than one town. So Charlie has a list of properties. And he's working with these owners himself. And at some point he says, I'm not getting anywhere. Either the owner is deceased or they're just not cooperating. And then he reaches out. He has a great relationship with the Attorney General's office. And then usually, so at first he would say, can you find me a receiver? There's not a lot of us. But then when he realized that this is a great way for Beckett to get affordable housing, he specifically asks for us. We also do a really good job. So so I have to say, this is a very popular program. Number one, the neighbors love it. You take a dilapidated, delinquent property and you turn it into a private home. The town likes it because the money that goes into building it is not from the town coffers, and they get taxes. So the house gets put back on the tax rolls. We like it because it brings more affordable housing, but it's also economic integration. You're putting a family who's affordable, 80% of AMI, into a neighborhood. We don't know what the other houses in the neighborhood are, but it blends right in.
So the process is the town representatives, either health or building inspector, identify properties that aren't being properly maintained, goes to the AG's office, and then the AG finds you or some independent person who then acts as the agent for the house, and it goes to court, and the judge decides who gets
Yes.
it, right?
No, the judge doesn't decide who gets it. So normally, like I said, the for-profit, thank you for asking that, because I didn't clarify that. The for-profit receiver will put it up to auction. Clean and simple. Goes to auction, highest bidder gets it. Because we're doing it as affordable housing, and because we want it to count on the subsidized housing inventory, we write an affordable fair housing marketing plan, affirmative fair housing marketing plan. They changed the name of it. And that plan includes a lottery. So we tell them how we're going to make sure everyone who needs to know about this knows about it. We do information sessions. We tell them how we're going to do information sessions. We tell them how we're going to advertise it. And then we take all of the applications that come in and we put them into a lottery, and we weight the lottery depending if we're doing a local preference or we racially balance the lottery, and then we choose who gets it. So it's not up to the judge. It's up to us. We did have to ask the judge permission to do that, and I had to explain it more than once, that that's the way we do it. But the judge really loves using this program for affordable housing, because you can imagine the idea of taking a private property away from someone is not their favorite thing to do. And apparently the for-profit receivers can kind of be hacks, but they really love what we're doing. So it's kind of spreading.
Right, but just to be clarified, in case anybody's watching the tape, we're not talking about we're talking about a landlord that might be, someone who's, basically a slumlord or something. We're not talking about regular folks' homes if they're just slightly off code.
I'm sorry, Patrick, you're incorrect. I know landlords are always the bad guys, right, Andrea? But no, we're talking about someone. So for example, the last house we did was someone who'd passed away, and none of the heirs wanted the property, so it just sat there for years, and it was going to sit there forever if somebody didn't do something. But it was a privately owned home. Currently, the one we're doing now is someone who it's in a lakeside development. It has lake rights, so he lived there with his wife, but he didn't want it anymore. But he couldn't sell it because it's really falling
It's
down.
nothing you're forcing on a homeowner is my point.
No.
This is abandoned property.
Like I said, at any time, the homeowner can buy out the receiver. So the homeowner can do remember the one I told you about where they just used us as motivation? The homeowner went to court and said, I got this, trust me. And of course, everybody said, go do it. And he did. Other situations have been where someone had a setback. They didn't have the money now, but they got it later. And so after some of the work was done, they were able to come back and buy out the receivership.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
This is very, very carefully managed. That as you say, taking someone's property is a last resort. And it's usually for people who are, just not able to maintain it.
So that's,
It would be better off if the homeowner is willing, right? It's like, oh, thank you, that's a great idea.
Very often the homeowners are willing.
As opposed to pushing somebody out of their house.
Yeah, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
So actually, there is one house in Stockbridge that came up before we became receivers. It is the last house in Stockbridge right after the industrial park, on the Lee line. And
Is that the greenhouse?
Let's not talk about specific properties.
Well,
I think,
Sorry.
the reason I bring it up is because the homeowner called me and said, what can we do? Like, we can't afford to bring it up to code, and we don't want to just let it sit there. And had I known about the receivership program, I would have said, let's talk to Stockbridge and get it in the receivership program. But they're taking care of it now.
Good. Okay, that's great.
that's
But you
great.
had a property at one time, the town took possession of a property on Cherry Hill, I think it was.
it was, yeah. We auctioned it. Yeah.
And you auctioned it, but this would have been an alternative to that.
I get that. Yep.
Are there any?
And we have several properties now in various stages of
Disrepair.
yeah, but also tax, some people just abandon things and so properties, we're running through the courts to, take possession of a number of properties that haven't, that are far in arrears, so to speak,
And if the town does take possession, what do you do?
No, that's.
So
why we're here.
hang on, there's two different ways to do this here. One is for the town to take it in tax title, and the other is for the town to put it in receivership. Now, the advantage to putting it in receivership is the very first thing I do when I become the receiver is I pay off the taxes. Because if I don't, they're just going to keep accruing. That's the only lien on the property that does not supersede my lien. So as soon as we start working on it, we have a receiver lien. And that's what I'm saying. Somebody, the homeowner would have to satisfy our lien to get it back, right? And when it is sold, ultimately, it's the receiver lien that's paid off. And then if we were a for-profit and we were actually making money on it, other liens would get paid off. But the only lien that supersedes ours is the taxes. So that's literally, I get named the receiver and I call the assessor and I say, what do we owe you?
You
So we
should,
want to pay it now.
whoever we assign to this question should sit down with Michael and Erica and go down our tax title list. Because I don't know if there's any that are, would be better suited for receivership, but we are in various stages of the number of properties.
Of course, always, yeah. Okay, so moving on to number 2. This is something that, it's so complicated because it's not like the Affordable Housing Trust can go in and improve the zoning. But if a town wants to increase its housing inventory, a lot of times it requires a good hard look at your zoning. We have, zoning that is built to keep us rural and keep us charming, which is nice. But it is, also, it also keeps out people of lower incomes. So I have some of your examples of your zoning in future slides, so we won't go into this too much, but some of the things you can do, the flex zoning idea that Patrick knows about, doing multifamily by right. So I did this presentation in Sheffield last night, and they have multifamily by right anywhere but the village center, which really doesn't make any sense. If you have multifamily, that's a good place to have it. If you put it out in the wilderness, you're not really adding to the community. If you put it on the Great Barrington line, people are just going to shop in Great Barrington. So conversion of single family to multifamily, you do have, and we'll talk about this. Stockbridge has a zoning law that allows for this, although it's not very generous. But New Marlboro has one that is, it doesn't add any encumbrances to doing the project. And then boarding house rules. So we are doing this project in Windflower that everybody's heard about, but you might be wondering how we're doing it because they don't have a boarding house rule in Great Barrington. So we are operating it as an inn with extended stays. It was a little bit of a legal jump rope to do that, but we got it done. Where Sheffield actually has a zoning law that allows for boarding houses, mostly because we already had boarding houses in Sheffield when the zoning laws were made. And then the third thing is, and this, I cannot stress this enough, this is so important, is educating people about why affordable housing is important, what it is, what it isn't, and why it's good for the community. And so having said that, I'm gonna skip your zoning for a minute and just go to some demographics after I get a sip of water. So I know you're all looking and saying, that's West Stockbridge. Why is she showing us West Stockbridge? So the reason I'm showing you West Stockbridge is because this is a classic millennial valley. And a millennial valley is when your community has children. If we distributed the whole population evenly over these years, everybody would be about 5%. Because that's how many categories we have. Well, we have 18, but it'll be a little bit more. But that's not really what happens in Berkshire County. We have some children, and then you'll notice that the population drops around the age of 20, and it doesn't come back up until the age of 40. And the median age for West Stockbridge is 55 to 59. Now, that is, even though we have an older population, there's big chunks over in the older section. the 55 to 59-year-olds are still working, right? We're really only getting, to the retirees at 65 to 69. And then not a lot of people are, living out their retirement in West Stockbridge. The issue here is this valley that we have, right here. We have other names for them besides millennials. In fact, we're going to have to stop calling them millennials in a couple of years because we got Gen Zs coming into this now. But we also call those people parents. Those are the people who are producing children, and we call them producers. Those are the people who are working. They're also entrepreneurs. So Sheffield's population is much more evenly distributed, and you can see the reflection of that in the businesses that are opening in Sheffield, right? So you get young people into a community, you get a new pizza parlor and a new bakery, and okay, I'll admit it, a distillery, a dispensary, a winery, and a brewery. But young people like that stuff. So let's look at Stockbridge. Stockbridge has, you have that Millennial Valley, but you guys are past, you're in the second stage of the Millennial Valley because there's this feedback loop. Remember that I said the people in this valley are also called parents.
You can send us these slides? Well,
Sure. When
thanks.
you don't have parents in your community, you don't have children in your community. So it tends to get weighted toward the higher end, right? Now, if I were going to keep going with this, I would show you a slide from Monterey. I don't have the slide, but I have the graph. The median age in Monterey, believe it or not, is 85 plus by a lot. It's over 15%. It's like 20% of the population is 85 plus. 77% of the population in Monterey is over 59. So it's heavily weighted to the older groups, and there's almost nobody in the young categories. So what does that mean? It means that Monterey had to develop a paid fire department.
Right.
They had no volunteers, right? And it's not like they could rely on Sandusfield or New Marlboro. In fact, it went the other way. As soon as Monterey got a paid fire department, they started doing mutual aid for all the towns around them. Now, you notice over here, you can explore over time. So like you can look at, I won't be able to because this is in a slide, but you can look at what it looked like in 1990, 2000, 2010. I'm very interested to know what Monterey looks like in 10 years with where do the 85-year-olds go? It's not like they have any, retirement living there. So, when you're talking to the community about affordable housing and why it's important, it's important because those are your consumers, producers, parents, and volunteers. Now, I'm not saying that older people don't volunteer, they certainly do, but they don't have to, and they don't really volunteer for the fire department that much, because I think the retirement age is 70. Okay, so let's talk about what Stockbridge already has.
I think we
You
should
do allow for multifamily development, but I think what's really interesting here, and you are the only ones, I've read the zoning for every town in Berkshire County. I don't work in North County, but I'm on some committees that work in North County. So we did a zoning analysis. No one else has ever like specifically outlined 4 developments providing affordable housing and then added an extra impediment to that. So I find that very interesting. So what it says here is, depending on the district, you need so much area per unit. And then if you're doing affordable housing, you have to add more room for every unit, more than one, So like in the R4 district, you have to add 2 acres per unit to 174 acres, which, I mean, I'm laughing because it's like, it might as well just say, don't put affordable housing here. Like, we don't want it, because it's certainly a lot easier to do it in the RC district. You only need 20,000 per unit to begin with, and then an extra 10,000 per unit.
So, and I believe the R4 district, if I'm not mistaken, is, the lot sizes are considerably smaller.
No, 4 acre. R4 is 4 acre. So they're
4
saying we have to go up to 6.
Yeah.
Oh, it's R4 is 4 acres.
Hey, June, I
Yeah.
have a question. I mean, I think it's helpful to sort of review this right now, but I could see us doing a whole session with you on the topic of zoning, and you said that you need to leave by 7:30.
Yeah.
Do you think that this maybe fits in a follow-up presentation? Because I don't want to rush this part.
Sure, I think this is a follow-up conversation, certainly. So my point is, if you haven't read your zoning, read it. Because now, having said that, let me say that in every other town in Berkshire County, we would really ignore your zoning, because affordable housing has 40B power. I'm going to explain that in case you don't know what it is. So remember that I said that there's a law that says every town in the Commonwealth needs to have 10% affordable housing.
Yeah.
That's the 40B law. And the 40B law says, there's no teeth to it. You don't get punished for not, the punishment is natural. You just don't have any firefighters, and you don't have any kids. But if you don't have 10% affordable housing, and a developer were to come in and say 20% of my units are going to be affordable, therefore, I'm going to ignore your frontage requirement, your setback requirements, your height requirements, the parking requirements. I can do whatever I want, and you can't stop me. And that's called a hostile 40B. So they would just go to your planning board and say, here's what it's going to look like. We're going to put this right on the lake, and we're going to do 200 units, but 40 of them are going to be affordable. So get over
We
it.
have 10%, so we're not subject to hostile
You
40B.
have 10%, so you are not subject to a hostile 40B. That's what I said. Any other town, right? I wouldn't worry about what the zoning says. But even though we do a friendly 40B, so we'll go to a town and we'll say, look, we have a really great spot for affordable housing. The neighbors like it. It's, it's close to amenities that people need. It's really going to boost the economy in your town, but it doesn't have enough frontage. So we would like you to forgive us that and let us do the project anyway. We ask nicely, and usually what happens is a town will condition it. They'll say, well, we'll let you do it, but we want you to put up a hedge, or we want you to, change your lighting or something like that. And we just work it out together.
And that's the zoning board of appeals. That's the permitting authority on friendly 40Bs.
Depends. It depends on the town. Yeah. Some towns do like, they bring all the boards together and they do a comprehensive permit board. They do an ad hoc committee to look at the projects. It depends on the town. In New Marlboro, we're actually going for a special permit, not a 40B, but it's going to the select board.
Okay.
Because that's the way their zoning is written. It depends on how your zoning is written. The thing is, though, even though it's friendly, and even though we cooperate, if a board were to deny us the permit, we would appeal, and all appeals for affordable housing are upheld. There's never been one that wasn't. Now, in your case, you have the 10%, so it'd be an interesting exercise to see, but I hope it never comes to that.
Yeah.
So you also have a zoning law that allows for conversion of a single family, which is great. As I said, it puts a little more work into it than New Marlboro does, but you have it. So let's see. We'll skip the zoning and we'll talk about financing. So how does a town make this happen? And obviously money. is a big thing because um, when we go to the state or the Federal Home Loan Bank and we say, hey, we have this great project, everyone in the town of Stockbridge really likes it. They say, really? Like, show us how much they like it. And that means like, so for example, New Marlboro, they don't have a CPA and they don't have an affordable housing trust and they don't have home funds. They did have ARPA funds and they gave us half of their ARPA funds. Also, the neighbors, and I mean the next door neighbors, contributed money for the acquisition. So I take that and I show it to the state and I say, look at this. This is buy-in, right? So other towns don't have that necessarily, but you can use state funds as your buy-in. So you have CPA, that's one way to do a buy-in. You have an affordable housing trust and you have the authority to move money, which is great. Affordable housing committees are nice, but they're powerless. They can't really move any money. So like, for example, the Lenox Affordable Housing Trust and the Great Barrington Affordable Housing Trust get their money from the CPA. Every year they put in a request to the CPA, they move money into the Affordable Housing Trust, and then it's so much more nimble because when you have to go through the CPA process, so Lenox, you have to apply in October. The second round, I think, is November or December. They have meetings throughout the winter. They decide who gets it. You have to go to town meeting and it gets voted on. The money's available in July. That is a very long time for a very small amount of money. Comparatively, like, the CPA might have 100,000, but if it's a $5 million project, it's not really significant, but it's significant in the sense that it says the town is committed to it. So home funds this is not a thing yet. Home funds come into the state from the federal government and they are distributed, to the towns that have consortiums or the big cities that have their own home management thing. And then the rest of us can apply for the scraps, which run out pretty quickly. Cape Cod got a little tired of that. And so they created their own home consortium. They're a bunch of small towns, but they got together and they created a home consortium. The Berkshire County Housing Coalition, all of us housing practitioners are investigating the opportunity to do that in Berkshire County. So that would be money that's not even town money. That's coming from the federal government into the county, but you could access it. Okay, ARPA funds. I know that Stockbridge got some ARPA funds and they used some ARPA funds. Those funds, one of the things they specifically said to use that money for was affordable housing because, like I said, the COVID had a bad impact across the country. Oops, I did Affordable Housing Trust Fund twice. CDBG. So that is, oops, sorry. That is the Community Development Block Grant, which I know that Stockbridge has had. Sometimes you can apply for that with other towns. It's often used for home ownership. Some towns, when someone uses CDBG funds, they will put a second mortgage on the home. Same thing that we talked about with the 0% interest mortgage. So it's a silent mortgage. And it can be, a 30-year thing, or it can be in perpetuity, whatever you decide to do. And then the Rural Small Town Housing Initiative, that is part of the EOHED one-stop process. That was an innovation on Charlie Baker's part, and I'm really happy about that. He recognized that that small towns and rural towns, there were so many funds that we weren't allowed to touch. There's funds that are specifically set aside for MBTA communities, and for big cities. And, when we apply, we get scored, we get points for different things. You get 5 points for being rural out of 100. It really doesn't get you there. So he did a special program, and was originally $100,000. Now it's up to $400,000. Construct has written the grant for towns 3 times. We've gotten awarded 3 times. So it has to come from the town, but we write it because we know how. And yeah, and it's a really easy grant to use. So that one is something you can do. And then we talked about receivership. So
How much can you get, June? How much can you get from the rural small
Oh,
town?
now it's $400,000.
So each grant is 400.
Yeah,
that right?
each grant is $400,000. And the yeah, so you do it as part of a one-stop. So that means that you apply into this big pool of money. And if they decide that your project really should be a MassWorks project or something else, they'll say, well, we're not going to give you the rural small town, but we're going to give you this instead. Or, well, maybe both, but whatever. It makes it easier to get into the application.
And what kind of properties did you get the money for?
We got it for the receivership in Beckett. We got it for Egremont, which ended up not building it, but we did add infrastructure to the property. We just didn't end up building the houses. I'll get into that another time. And then we got it for Beckett again. I think you can only do it for the same town every other year, but we were 3 years out from when we did it. And the many of the times that we've gotten it, we were the only ones that were actually producing housing. Other people who were awarded the grant used it for infrastructure. And obviously the first time we did, but the 2 other times that we used it, we were the only ones that used it to produce housing.
And does it have to be used for new affordable housing, or can it be used for doing capital maintenance on existing?
So the first time I did it was for the receivership, and that was a renovation. So it can be used for existing.
What about Pine Woods? Could we get that money for Pine Woods?
Oh, that's a good question. We could try. Sure.
Be great. We got to finish the driveway and there's all those other repairs. And we can't
Yeah.
really use, the other question would be, it looks like we couldn't use them for appliances and stuff. It'd be nice be interesting if we could renovate kitchens with it.
Okay. Yeah, that'd be great. So then I just want to revisit this slide because we only talked about some of it. So like I said, we go from identifying the property and evaluating the property. So we also want to look at, is there room for conservation on the property? What kind of soil type are we talking about? And how suitable is it for the community? Like, what are we building and where are we building it? And does it work where it is? And then we talked about the planning stage, and that is, a heavy lift right there. And then the funding. So there's an alphabet soup of funders. Those are in the glossary that I shared with you. And each one of those has their own funding cycle. And that's probably what takes the longest. I'm coming into a project this year, so I will be in a funding cycle at the end of January, beginning of February, and because they usually have 2 pieces, then another one end of March, beginning of June, and another piece will go from the end of July, and then there's a piece of it. Yeah, so we just go through, and sometimes we don't get funded on the first round. So we will get passed over. This last funding round for DHCD was just overwhelmed with applications. They had 3 times as many applications as they could fund. But you get into it, you get rejected, but you get in the queue. They know you're there, they know what you're trying to do, and they work with you to get you into the next round. So we don't lift a shovel until all the funding is in place. We actually will have a closing on all of our sources So I've never seen so many attorneys in one place at one time. So, an attorney for every single funding source that shows up, and, we sign 1 million documents, and we actually have a closing, and we record all of those restrictions that we promised before we start our construction. So, people talk about construction taking a long time. In our case, it really doesn't, because our contractors have been waiting, and so we got all our closings. So they're ready to go when we're ready to go. And they're pretty quick. And we get that done. And then I talked about the affirmative plan that we do. We start putting that into effect as the buildings are going up. And then we screen the tenants. So we get applications. And, I'd like to say we take everyone who applies, but we don't. That's another misconception people have about affordable housing. They think that we take people with no income and we give them free housing. But if we did that, how would they pay their utilities? How would they eat? And around here, how would they get anywhere? Because it's not like we have a lot of transportation. So we screen people to make sure they're under the income limit, but we also screen people to make sure that they are not cost burdened. We are not in the business of eviction. We don't want to be kicking people out of housing. So we look at them as they come in and say, yeah, you have to be able to afford this, or we're not going to take you, so that we don't get ourselves in that position. We have other arrangements for people who are, really, really low income and desperate. But we don't necessarily move those people into permanent housing. It's kind of, again, a continuum, right? And we do check people's credits and criminal background and landlord history. And then when the unit's ready to look at, we show it to them, and hopefully we sign a bunch of leases, weeks before we actually move people in. Okay, are there any more questions?
I know you need to go to your other
I do.
commitments,
Yeah.
June, but can you give us 5 minutes at least on the status of Pine Woods and the needs?
Sure. So Pine Woods, we got half the driveway done. We're very excited about that. And they promised to come back as soon as the macadam factory opens, and they can come back in the spring and finish it up. So hopefully the half they did won't be destroyed by plows by then, but there's been no snow so far, so I'm okay with that. The other things we need at Pine Woods are boilers, appliances, and floors and doors. So we go back and forth about what's more important, the floors or the doors. We've been systematically replacing, when it was built, there was a very unfortunate parquet floor. It was like 6x6 parquet tiles, but they splintered badly and they buckled. And so we have replaced all of those. And now we're replacing, wherever we can, we're replacing carpet with engineered flooring. Because when you have to replace a carpet, you have to replace the whole room. And when you do engineered flooring, we always keep some extra pieces. You can just patch it. You can just put a piece in where the piece was. So we're working on that. And then it's not all the doors, but the doors that were put in on the porches were not properly flashed. So, when you put in a door, the water runs down the door, and if there's nothing underneath it, it'll just get underneath the door and rot your floor.
Right.
So that means that every time we have to replace a door, we often have to replace subflooring as well. And then of course, the finish flooring also. So we've been doing that, for a long time. So we don't have to do all of them, but we'd like to go through and do all the rest.
And what, you want to give us an overall budget for what has to be done?
So it's almost $1 million. It's like, I'm sorry, I don't have I should have gotten the exact number, but I was not able to. It's about $950,000, the whole thing. But you've already given us, the CPA has already given us some of that. We have about $145,000 from the CPA. And then, yeah, and we're still trying to get funds from other places. We applied to the Dana Jack Fitzpatrick Fund, but we didn't get that one. Well, we got it for something else, but I guess, driveway's not sexy, so we didn't get it for that. But we haven't stopped looking.
Do you have, I mean, to agree that like, CPA looks for, to be a matching fund provider rather than a sole source provider. Does that help get you there, or are you looking,
So we, like I said, one of the things we do when we plan a project, and I have to admit, it wasn't done well at Pinewoods. That was before my time. We do a capital fund and we do an operating fund. We did dip into the operating fund during COVID because people, weren't leaving their houses. They couldn't go to work and they weren't paying their rent. But we bounced back from that pretty well. But the capital reserve, we still have some money in the capital reserve, so we could match out of that. And I really have to go now.
all right.
I
Thank you.
think, June, we are very grateful to you for this very informative session. I think that it's complex and there's, I don't know, but I have a lot more questions about what other, funding sources, which of these funding sources should we be focused on? How should we be, well, we need to be working with you as constructively as we can to get Pinewoods. One of the first goal of this group is to get Pinewoods in top quality condition. And there's been a lot of conversation and a lot coming from Patrick about the need or perhaps the desire to expand the number of units there. And maybe could you just give us a quick,
Oh, not to,
Next time.
no, it's just to do it the next time, yeah.
Yeah, next time, sure.
quick.
And the receivership is a low hanging fruit. It's a great way to get started. I would say that the best way to learn how to do this project is to do a project. If you pick a property and sometimes you're going to pick a property and you're going to look into the feasibility and you're going to find out it's not feasible, but at least you did that. You found out how to do a feasibility, right? So I think that is probably the best way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
well, I know that before we even get to thinking about doing new projects, we must get Pinewoods in good shape.
I would say that's going to be concurrent. Yeah, we've always been working on Pinewoods from the day I started. We have been working on Pinewoods. So yeah, it's it will get there eventually.
Let us know how we can help.
Okay,
All right.
I'm gonna go. Thanks so much,
All right.
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, June. All right. Whoa.
Yeah,
But I did want to bring that up. I think we really need to understand, Patrick, about the need for, whether there is any need to expand Pinewoods.
No, I think so too. I think it's not a question of need. It's a question of, it's all the points that she was making. If we had, she's made the point about how the tax credits that they had issued have expired, that there's difficulty in selling new tax credits based on what's there, but that newer developments tend to draw better, are more attractive for selling credits. And that would also get our population up in a way that you could see the graph that does what it needs. So the word need, I think is this is always going to be a judgment call, but those are the reasons why this, long-term money for investment and maintenance or families, and the ability to kind of, attract financing that we are unable to attract right now.
Yeah.
But she can address it the next time.
But whether that location is where we should be focusing for additional units, or whether we should really be looking for another location if we want to put.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we could do any and all those things, but the problem with not doing it at Pine Woods is that there's no way to maintain Pine Woods. It's going to get worse and worse. So unless you come up with a marketing formula that involves, what I heard her say was something a little bit more, attractive to those providing financing to want to invest in, then we can have something bright and shiny and new, but Pine Woods will continue to deteriorate.
Right.
So, but we need to get her back and talk about this some more. Obviously, I'm no expert.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Patrick, we ought to see if we can get her to share the financials for Pine Woods with us. Because I think, it would say a lot. If they have money in the capital fund, why haven't they used that so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's from,
I mean,
yeah.
I don't know how, I don't know how much is there and
Yeah.
whatever, so.
So,
But Liz, I know you're not here to talk tonight, but I think that having a better and any closer relationship with June and what's going on there is really a top priority. I see it as a top priority for us before we really look at too much else.
Yeah. I agree.
Are you, no, just nod. Don't speak, just nod. Yes or no?
I know it doesn't sound like me, but I agree. I do.
All right.
Okay.
Let's go on. We have a little time left. A few more things to do. Jen, do you want to talk about, were you able to talk?
Yes, I'll give a very quick report on the Williamstown housing needs. I spoke with Andrew Groff, who's the town planner. And Williamstown has not done a housing production plan. What they did this past year was a housing needs assessment, which was completed in March. It cost $15,000. It has a lot of the same statistics that housing production plan would have in it. It was done, funded by the District Local Technical Assistance Program, which is part of the BRPC. And the study was done by Chris Brown and Mark Malloy at BRPC.
okay.
And I know that Nancy Socha, is that how you pronounce her name, is the representative for Stockbridge to go to the
As
BRPC.
well as Christine Rasmussen.
Okay,
Two.
okay. So maybe if we wanted to do that, that might be a good idea. What they're doing instead of a housing production plan now is that they're doing a master plan for all of Williamstown. And it started about a year ago. They have an 11-member steering committee. They're expecting it will cost $179,000 to do this master plan. And they're working with Resilience Planning and Design, which is a firm out of Vermont that he highly recommends, has done a really good job so far in the work that they've been doing. So next, I would say, if you look at the population and the other statistics, Williamstown, Stockbridge, Lenox, Williamstown is about 4 times the population of Stockbridge. And their median age is about 30, unlike Stockbridge, which is 50, and Lenox, which is 55.
Stockbridge is higher than 50.
Is it?
Or much higher, yeah.
Well, this was in 2010, so it's probably higher now. And I suspect that the Williamstown 30 median age is because of all the students and young, And their median income is 91,000 versus 53 here and 60 roughly in Lenox. Their population that's over 65 is only 21% versus much higher here and in Lenox. Their housing units, about 3,000 compared to Lenox of 3,000, and we're about 1,700, somewhere in that range. They only have about 15% of their housing units for kind of seasonal and, second homeowners type, so that it's a much smaller thing. The thing that is interesting, because they do have also that little valley where they have a lot of young people and students, not children, but, and then quite a few people who are in their 50s, aging. And the college is concerned that, there are quite a few faculty and staff who are going to be retiring in the next decade. And so they need to bring in more people to, hire to replace them. And that what they're finding is that the people who are going to be retiring don't want to leave Williamstown. They want to stay there. So, but where are all these new people going to live? And so one of the things the town is doing is working with the college to identify and bring up more rental as well as kind of condo units. They have a project underway right now, Green River Cottages, which would have 21 units, 5 of which would be affordable. So a lot of them are mixed use, not all entirely affordable. They're purchasing 3 lots and working with the Berkshire Habitat to build a few more units. They have Cable Mills, which is a long-term, it's a condo arrangement, but what the college has done is do a long-term lease for a number of those units. And then they would rent them to, new people coming in for the college and so on. So that's.
It's workforce housing specifically for the college.
Well, that part would be because, and the town is really encouraging kind of working together with the college to identify places where they could build.
Did you get a copy of?
And have some affordable housing in it, but also, because a lot of the young people coming into the college to be staff or faculty aren't going to be able to afford to buy a house, particularly early on, so.
Did you get a copy of the housing needs assessment that they generated?
Yes, it's online.
Okay, great.
If you want, I can.
Yeah, just send the link.
It's done? The housing needs
Yeah.
assessment is done?
Yeah, it's like 80 pages long or something.
Okay, good.
I think
So
that
I'll send that around to everyone.
the link would be terrific.
Okay.
That, in talking to Laura Scherfeld, who's the woman, community assistance woman at MHP, Mass Housing Partnership, she felt that would be the best focus, at least as a place to start, was
Housing needs assessment.
do a housing needs assessment.
Yeah. Well, what Andrew said was that these 2 folks from BRPC are quite good at doing it. They've done them for a number of different places, so they know what they're doing. They know what the data sources are.
They probably have all the data
They probably do.
already.
Yeah.
It's also nice to use local people
Yeah.
as opposed to spreading the wealth to the eastern part of the state. That's great. That's really helpful.
Okay.
Do you have anything else?
Nope.
All right, thank you. I'm next. Quickly, just to add to that, everybody has a copy of it, but they have done an overall housing for the county plan, which we all have copies of. But I don't think the people involved with that are the people that he mentioned. And what's my other, Pittsfield, I haven't been able to get a hold of the woman who's head of that has not, I haven't heard back from her. But Laura is out, Laura Scherfeld is out, but I did talk to her assistant and they did recommend a woman named Jen Golson. And is that a name that came up when you talked to the Lennox people? Anyway, she's another planner who has done.
Maybe it did. I'd have to go back and look.
She's a planner and she started her own firm. I thought perhaps it might be.
Yeah, I think
Somebody that Lennox.
I think it was.
She's
had
on
used.
Wait.
Don,
All right, so I didn't have a direct homework assignment from last week to this week. So yeah, actually, to be honest with you, I've been really engaged personally in my new job a lot.
That's great.
So I don't have anything to report, except the last time that we met with Jim and Andrea, we were waiting for some sort of response for them, I believe, and I was going to reach out to them, but I've sort of dropped the ball a bit on that.
They're sitting right here. Andrea,
Yeah.
do you want to just update us quickly on the grants that you got and where you are figuring out what you can do with your property?
We did receive a $3,000 grant from Mass Housing, Laura Schufelt, and they're going to delegate the deed for us there, the deed restriction. So that's where we are on here. I did have a couple of phone calls in to the state to see if they'd like to participate in a home purchase. We were talking about the home there on Park Street. So I'm waiting to hear back from Mr. Chen about that. I wanted to know if we could put it on the state rolls if the house was purchased and given to us, and I guess no, because they're not adding anything to the state rolls. It would be like a 705, they call it a scattered site program. But he was gonna go find out if there was any money to contribute towards just adding units in general, which there might be, but I haven't heard back yet. That was just a couple days ago.
All right. That would take us in a new direction. Liz and I had identified a property that potentially might be good for a particular Section 8 family that Andrea's attempting to help. That particular property has, Liz, as I understand, it's gone under agreement. Is that a?
That was my last understanding about it, yes. I mean, I don't know if it's still held. I can look it up while you're talking.
Okay. But.
I just asked the question just of the state, just to see if there is anything there or
Right.
something like that.
Okay, and once you have that information, that'd be great to know if there was funding and how much funding there might be to help for a down payment.
Well, certainly in that and having the availability right away, because when a property like that comes up, they go fast. They go
Right.
really, they don't sit unless there's something terribly wrong. Things that are priced well tend to go because they're priced well.
Right. And that was, it did need some work. It needed a new kitchen and a few other things. But anyway, it was a start. And Andrea, just what was your opinion? I know you looked at it.
I thought it was a great house. Initially I didn't see that maybe we'd make it work as accessible, but once I got inside, I saw the possibilities. I also liked the thought of doing like single room occupancy, kind of like towards the workforce housing portion of it.
I
That
haven't
was also a
shared.
nice thought.
Okay.
Okay, so it's still under,
Like
it
a
is still
house sharing.
pending.
Sorry, what did you say, Liz?
Park Street, it's under contract, but it's not pending yet, so it's not set in stone.
All right, well, we should keep watching
Okay.
that. Patrick?
Yes, so Stuart Saginaw came in and presented at CPC. He's like the Community Preservation Foundation Director. I think Erica is getting us a list of what the available funding for CPC is. I haven't seen that yet this week. She talked about doing it earlier this week. And so, once we know what that is, I think that I'll try to talk to Sally about just sort of figuring out kind of how we're going to be working with them.
We don't have a clear picture. The idea, in talking with June today, she said if we could work out an arrangement with CPC where whatever money they want to allocate to housing comes directly to us, and we take the role of dispersing it in the housing sector.
Right.
She said that's really desirable because it's a lot more flexible. But I don't know whether,
We'll want to talk to her about what restrictions, if any, that are, if it comes directly from CPC are lost if it goes through us. It's not clear to us that any of them are, but she has much more experience in this than we do.
June.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Okay,
I need to go.
all right. You can go to the next meetings?
Yes.
Those dates are good, and they're good for you. I think they're good for
The
Jan.
date is when?
The January 16th and 30th and February 13th
Yes.
for the next few meetings. And Liz, that's clear on your calendar for those dates? Okay.
Was that January 16th?
30th
30th and
and February 13th.
February 13th. They're all Mondays. We're going to shift to Monday.
January 30th and
Thank you,
February
Patrick.
15th.
Okay. Anybody have anything else?
Am I going to be here the 15th? Let me just see. We have a,
Anybody else? Andrea, do you have anything else for us? Appreciate your sitting in for the meeting. Do you all have
Not
any?
at this time, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Anyone move to adjourn?
just one
Okay.
quick note about the CDC.
Oh, wait, yes.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
the meeting is for the January 30th. I'll see
The 16th,
February,
Both.
January 16th,
January 16th and January
February
30th
30th, right,
and February 15th.
right.
13th. February 13th.
I am not here tonight. I'm so sorry. All right. We're right kind of in the middle of a big deal with the marble block building down there right now. Have their hands full. I've got a meeting coming up with them shortly.
Great.
It was interesting to listen to her speak because I don't understand really what's going on. There's just a few people that are doing it in that organization, and I'm not one of them. But it was very informative to listen to her today. So I will let you know
All right.
about that.
The next meeting, sorry, I did skip over that. Whether we do ask the CDC to come, or should we ask June to come back at our next meeting?
I would ask June 1st. I think until after, yeah. I think we might be better off to try to aim for the 30th of January for the CDC
Okay.
or the 13th of February.
Why don't we, Liz, why don't we see if June can come back on the 16th of January? Because there's a whole section of the zoning that we didn't get into at all. Plus, there is a lot of detail about Pinewoods that we really need. And if we ought to ask her for the written financials,
Yeah,
not just.
if she
here's
can do,
this.
if she can do that. It would be good to look at them even in advance of the meeting.
Yes, if she could distribute that to everybody, Liz, before, I mean, the holidays, people are busy, but
Yeah.
if she sends it out the 1st of January. Are you saying, I think you're on mute. If you're trying, are you trying to talk to us?
Personally, I'm on mute.
I know.
The back of my throat's burning out. Thank you. So I'm asking you for financials as well as coming to speak to us on the 16th.
Of January.
Right.
With the idea that we'd focus on zoning and also much more intensely on what Pinewoods needs.
Yeah.
Because if it's $1 million upgrade. And this other question about, it's very confusing to me because it doesn't seem practical to even be discussing expanding that project. It's not physically, there's no more land, it's a swamp. If we were going to put serious money into more housing that's affordable, or at least, is workforce housing, it seems like it ought to be in a different location, and it ought to be truly a mixed income project that would be integrated into the community. But to be discussed later. Anybody else? Thank you very much.
You're good.
All right. Liz? All right, thank you, Liz. Those minutes were terrific. Thank you very, very much. You are the queen of that.
Move to adjourn.
Second? All those in favor?
All right, done.
Aye, aye, aye.